Hey there, metalheads. Papa Billydeth here, and I'm going to be talking to you about the big four of thrash, my big four of thrash, and then the new big four of thrash. Alright, so the big four of thrash, you all know them: Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. They're credited with popularizing the subgenre. They were the four thrash bands to get platinum albums, and that's basically the reason they're called that, because they're the most financially successful bands out of thrash. They're the only ones who have gotten platinum albums, and it's not really about their actual material. It's more just about the money, which that's my problem with it. So they are not my personal four big four of thrash bands. Why? I don't consider three out of the four bands to even be thrash bands. Here are the reasons. Let's start with Anthrax. So their debut is a speed metal classic. Spreading the Disease, that's my favorite Anthrax album. I consider that to be just more of a heavy metal album with some inklings of thrash here and there. Among the Living, that's without a doubt a thrash album. But then after that, until the Bush era, it's basically just sort of this punkish sort of heavy metal. Then the Bush era was just sort of like alternative, newish groove, whatever you want to call it. So then their last two albums, Worship Music and For All Kings, they've been just pure heavy metal albums. So you see what I'm saying? One album is thrash out of 11 albums. Now, it's hard to call them a thrash band when that's the case. So now onto Metallica. So their first four albums are landmark thrash albums. Then they've got three heavy metal albums, which would be the Black Album, their newest album, and Death Magnetic. None of them were thrash. They had some dabbles here and there. I mean, Spit Out the Bone, That Was Just Your Life. They have some thrash in them, but that's not their foundation. So I consider those to be more heavy metal albums. Then they've got their two rock albums, Load and Reload, and then after that, whatever the hell Saint Anger is, industrial. I don't know. They had like Slipknot drums on it. I don't know what you call it. Um, so that's the reason I don't consider Metallica to be a thrash band. Now, when I say I don't consider these bands thrash bands, it doesn't mean I don't like them. I still love these bands. I just don't really consider them to be true to form thrash, if that's what you want to call it. So then, lastly, Megadeth. So similar to Metallica, their first four albums are thrash masterpieces, and then Countdown to Extinction, it's more of a heavy metal album with a little bit sort of some rockiness in it, more of a heavy metal album. But then you got Euthanasia and Cryptic Writings, which are heavy metal albums, but then they're kicking up the rock in them a little bit more. Um, After that, then you got Risk, which is a pop rock abomination. Um, then the next three albums are just sort of rocky metal, sort of got a little bit of alternative going on in there. Endgame, in my opinion, is definitely a thrash album. That's actually my favorite Megadeth album. Now, I feel like that's a true to form thrash album. Listen to Head Crusher, and you'll agree with me. And then Dialectic Chaos, straight thrash. So, and then their last three albums have been once again more heavy metal albums with little bits of thrash thrown in there. So that's the problem I have with those bands being labeled as the big four of thrash, because I just don't consider those three to be thrash. Slayer I do consider thrash, but I mean, look at their discography. It's like they've put out the same album multiple times. So there's nothing wrong with that. AC/DC, Iron Maiden, they've all done that, and it's good. Then, so now my big four of thrash. Alright, so this is what I consider to be my big four of thrash metal bands. So obviously start with my favorite band, Testament. Then no one can say they are not a thrash band. Then you've got Slayer, which we talked about before, one sticking around. Death Angel, and then Sepultura. Now I know that Sepultura didn't stick with the thrash sound, but the difference between them and Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax is that they actually got heavier over time. But also, when you talk about Sepultura, most of the time you're referring to the classic era, the Max Cavalera era. Nothing against Derek Green, they've got some good stuff in there too, but Sepultura basically became a completely different band. They only kept one member, Igor Cavalera. They they only had the guitarist there, and he wasn't even putting down solos or anything for a while on there. So they really stopped being a thrash band after. Even when Max Cavalera was in there, Roots wasn't a thrash band album, but then he left, and then they just what became more of, like I said, my Metallica Origins video. They became more of like a hardcore sort of band. So now that gets us out. That gets my big four out of the way. Now here's the new big four. So the new big four of thrash, in my opinion. So bands basically post 2000s would be starting with Havoc. I feel like Havoc has been leading the charge of the thrash the thrash revitalization, fourth wave, whatever you want to call it. Havoc has been at the forefront of it. Warbringer. Warbringer is fantastic. Harlot. I love Harlot. And then Toxic Holocaust. Now, a lot of people would probably put Vector on this list, which with good reason, but I mean, Vector is an awesome band, but everyone's calling them thrash band, but in my opinion, Vector is more, I don't know, it doesn't sound like thrash when I listen to it. I mean, I would say it's more of like a technical melodic death metal, maybe not, maybe more like technical melodic progressive death metal or something. I don't know. It's weird, whatever it is. So now my justification for that is when you listen to a band like Death Angel or Testament, you got them. Then you listen to Vector. Now it's very hard to find any similarities between the two. But then you listen to a band, say Wormed or Dying Fetus, which are both technical death metal bands, you can find a lot more comparisons between the two there. Now, Vector could almost be their own genre because they're so unique, but that's why I just don't really consider them to be thrash all the way, but most people do, so I respect your opinion if you believe that they should be in the Big Four thrash. They definitely are. They definitely set up. Their Terminal Redux was definitely an instant classic. So, that's my video. Let me know what you think, and let me know what your big fours of thrash would be, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Peace.